The Madeline Journeys, Book 4, End of the Tunnel. Chapter 1. It had been 2 months since her party had arrived in the Elven homeland, a beautiful area of rolling hills and small lakes surrounded by giant willows, and something that looked like a magnolia, but had tiny flowers. The library was set in a small grove, domed roofs of the clustered buildings dwarfed by the ancient trees. The rooms were filled with scrolls and books preserved by a spell that kept the air dry. Madeline remembered feeling both awe and crashing disappointment when she first stepped foot in this room. Awe for the sheer age of the knowledge contained in the room, and disappointment because she wouldn't be able to read any of them. She'd learned to speak the common language, but reading was a whole other skill. Each race had its own script, and none of them made sense to her. Amber Birch had solved the problem. Taking a thin sheet of paper and speaking a few words over it, she handed it to Madeline. "This will help you understand what is written. Place it on top of the page you wish to read, and it will become clear to you." Since then, Madeline had been able to read the words, but most had not become clear. They were running out of time to close the gate between worlds before the next battle started. "Another dead end, Madeline?" Amber Birch asked as she entered the room. The elven woman was small. Elves are about 2/3 of the size and mass of a human. They appeared ageless at first to Madeline. Dressed in a loose gown that was the same color as the deepest part of the lake, with her hair braided in a complicated pattern that reached her hips, Amber Birch gave the impression of being willowy, but without the height. "Not exactly," she answered, rubbing her back to ease the stiffness from bending over the scroll for so long. "I think I may have found more details of the past invasions, but some of the writing has faded so much that I can barely read it." Behind Amber Birch came a servant bearing food, calf, and wine. Jode joined them as the servant finished laying out the meal. "I can have someone rewrite it," Amber Birch offered. "Elven eyes are sharper. It may help." "I don't think we have time for a rewrite." Madeline looked at the piles of books in the room, knowing she didn't have time to read all of them once. The gate would open soon, and if she didn't find a way to seal it, everyone here would die in the battle. They would only be the first of thousands. "I'll take it outside tomorrow. The sun will help make the words more clear." Amber Birch reached for Madeline's hand to help her rise, but she waved it away, reluctant to rely on others until she really was unwieldy with pregnancy. The small bump was getting to the point where she'd soon have to find a different posture. She had already had to give up riding. She was going to cling to the last shreds of independence as long as she could. Jode touched her shoulder to pull her attention away from the pile of books. "You are tired. When did you last eat?" Madeline pushed back from the table, loath to abandon her studies, but knowing she was getting tired and needed a break. "I guess I could do with a real meal. Perhaps I can come back to this later." Jode took her arm and led her to the table. His assistance was always welcome. "We will eat together. Tell me what you found, and we may be able to discover a truth between us that is hidden to you." "Don't you get tired of talking about this?" Madeline longed for a time when she could sit alone with her husband and talk about anything, or nothing. "It is not a subject we can avoid, so let us embrace it. If I am unable to help, it will be of value to have Amber Birch hear what you think you have learned. Perhaps you understand a different meaning because you come from a different world." Madeline knew that it was certain that she had a different understanding. "It's probably why I get to be the chosen one. My misunderstanding will uncover the secret." Amber Birch poured calf for Madeline and wine for herself and Jode. "You are both right," she said. "Without discussion, you will never know if there is a difference between what you understand and what we do." Taking a sandwich from Jode, Madeline gathered her thoughts and quelled an odd feeling that she should keep her information close. This was the same as when she did a case review with her colleagues at home. No, on Earth. No, the other Earth. Oh, shit. "Let's start from the beginning," she said. "You know that there are supposed to be multiple universes." Jode nodded and added, When worlds come close enough, a gate opens, allowing people to cross. But only warlike people seem to come here. It is odd that only the elves seem to know this. Madeline looked at Amber Birch, who was studying her glass of wine. If the elven woman had nothing to offer, then there was probably no difference yet to be discussed. Yes, this is the first time that people outside the elven world have been brought in to help. Amber Birch looked at them. It has been the duty of the elves to save the world since time began. I will be happy to have you succeed, Madeline, but the army will come in case we have to do our duty. Some of the invaders survive, Madeline said, ignoring the implied dig at her ability. Smiling at them, Amber Birch straightened a fold in her robe. The Trill haven't yet integrated. Not understanding why the woman was suddenly undermining them, Madeline responded. If the elves kept this a secret, how did the others explain new types of people showing up? Amber Birch rose and bowed to Madeline. I think we are both feeling the stress of our study. Perhaps it would be better if Jode acted as your sounding board. Without waiting for either of them to respond, she gracefully exited the room. Shocked at the change in Amber Birch, Madeline looked at Jode to see him frowning. The woman had never been other than a gracious host. Although the library wasn't her home, she was there to mentor and guide Madeline as she searched for ways to fulfill the prophecy. What just happened? Did I step over some line of etiquette? Jode still stared at the archway, apparently as surprised as Madeline at the reaction. He shook his head as if trying to bring himself back to the present. Not one that I am aware of, he said. Perhaps she took your words to mean that the elves should have asked for help. It is clear they are proud of their role as safekeepers. So much for getting help. Madeline placed her empty mug on the tray for the servants to clear later. I've only found hints and clues that there is an answer. I think we need to return to the gate. I do not like that place. Jode stood and walked to the window. I always feel that we are under attack when we are there. They had been there only twice, but she knew the feeling he meant. A feeling of being watched, of evil waiting for a moment of indecision or inattention. We will have to go there, Jode. She joined him at the window and patted his hand, a gesture meant to reassure, but it didn't help quell the dread that had crept over her with his words. I don't think we can hope that the answer is here, that we will just have to go to the circle with a solution. It is not just your life I worry about. She turned to look at the table of books. I know, it's everyone's life. I meant the children. Feeling guilty that they hadn't been her first thought, Madeline turned back to Jode. Yes, but if I don't fix this, they will die. The words hurt to say. The thought of her babies in danger chilled her body from the inside. It's not something I can think about, Jode said, joining her back at the books. Shall I stay? She warmed at the thought of company. If you find sitting watching me read interesting, I would love you to stay. It gets lonely in here. He pulled a chair from the corner and sat beside her. You can tell me what you are reading. We will discuss the meanings as you find them. Madeline pulled the next book on the pile towards her, opening it to the first page. Placing her translation sheet on the title page, she read aloud, The Life of Timber Raven, a Scholar of the Last Invasion. Turning to the next page, she slipped the translation sheet on top. The words blurred, something that happened in about half the book she read. Then the words came into focus in patches. It took a few minutes to get all of the words clear enough to read, the final ones flickering a few times before settling. I don't know if that means anything, she said, when Jode asked if it was normal. I'll ask Amber Birch, but not just now. I think she needs a bit of alone time. Let someone else smooth the way for you. Madeline let the tension she was feeling out in a laugh. I can be tactful, she said, when she had her laughter under control. Yes, you can, but you don't have to do everything. Regis and Springheart can do more than just help you read documents. Madeline agreed, not really believing she could delegate any of the important tasks. Whatever had twisted Amber Birch's panties was probably something simple. Having to help the Chosen One find a way to seal the gate was probably almost as stressful as being the Chosen One. Why don't you get them doing that? I'd rather she was back to her pleasant self tomorrow at the gate. Like you say, It feels like there's already an enemy waiting to attack there. We don't want to bring any animosity with us." Jode kissed her and left with a promise to return and help. As soon as she was alone, Madeline put aside the book she'd been reading and started flipping through her notes. They were going to the circle of stones that formed the entrance to the gate between worlds. She didn't have any information on how to seal the gate, but there was a book that described the gate and the construction. There had to be something useful in there, something to guide them tomorrow. She found the notes in the book, had them laid out, and was settling in when Amber Birch joined her. "I apologize for my behavior," she said from the archway. It felt as though she was waiting for permission to enter the room. Madeline stepped away from the papers she spread out, knowing that if she sat at the table, her attention would wander to the information. She'd already done something to upset Amber Birch. She wasn't willing to chance doing it again. "We're all tired and tense," Madeline said as she approached. "Let's just forget about what happened." She took the woman's hand and drew her into the room. Telling Amber Birch about the planned trip in the morning, Madeline asked about the problem with the translation page. Amber Birch frowned. "It should not happen. Please, show me." Digging out the life of Timber Raven, Madeline repeated the exercise. The page became clear immediately. Annoyed, Madeline turned the page and said, "Let me try a fresh page." The next page came clear immediately, as did the following 5 pages. "Great. It's not going to happen while you're here." Amber Birch took the translation sheet from Madeline. Holding it up to the light coming through the window, she placed her hand on the page and muttered some words. "I have recharged the spell, but this fuzziness should not be happening at all. Let me know as soon as it does in the future." Madeline nodded and hoped that it would happen soon.